Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Josh and you're watching Our History. Today we're going over part 2 of the Battle of Bronkhorstspruit, which was the first major engagement of the First Boer War. So if you enjoy this, please be sure to like, and if you're new here, consider smashing the subscribe button. If this isn't your first rodeo, and you haven't shown some love to that subscribe, now is your opportunity. Thank you for watching. Opposing forces. The British infantry utilized the Martini Henry Mark III rifle, which fired 14.7 or 11.4mm ammunition. They also carried a 25.25-inch long bayonet. The soldiers adorned the traditional red coat of the British Army, accompanied by blue trousers. However, concerns were raised in the British Parliament following the Battle of Bronkhorstspruit that the uniforms were conspicuous and made soldiers vulnerable to Boer gunfire. Despite this criticism, the Secretary of State for War, Hugh Childers, opposed changing the uniforms at the time. Eventually, over the next 18 years, the red coat was gradually phased out. The exact composition of the British column at Bronkhorstspruit is uncertain, with varying numbers provided by different historians. One account by Laband lists 6 officers and approximately 246 men from the 94th Regiment, accompanied by 2 officers and 4 or 5 men from the Army Service Corps, a surgeon from the Army Medical Department, and 3 men from the Army Hospital Corps. Another historian, G.R. Duxbury, suggests slightly different numbers, noting 6 officers and around 230 men in the 94th Regiment. However, both sources agree that the 94th Regiment was experiencing low morale due to previous conflicts and tedious garrison duty, leading to a rise in desertion. The Boers, or Afrikaners, did not have a formal standing army or a centralized command structure. Instead, every adult male Boer, known as a burger, between 16 and 60 years old, was obligated to be prepared for military service without pay. They were responsible for providing their own horse, equipment, rifle, and ammunition. Each town formed its own militia unit called a commando, with membership varying greatly based on population size, ranging from 60 to 4,000 individuals. Many Boers grew up as skilled hunters and learned to shoot from an early age. The widely used rifle among the Boers was a falling block breech-loading Wesley Richards with a 12.7 or 11.4mm caliber. According to South African historian Felix Mechanik, the Boers had an advantage over the British in the Anglo-Boer War due to their exceptional handling and rapid firing of their weapons. This led the British to believing there were more Boers than there actually were. The Boers fought as mounted infantry, using their horses for mobility and launching surprise attacks on their opponents. The Boer commando at Bronkhorstspruit is estimated to have around 200 to 300 men, although some contemporary British reports exaggerated the figure to be between 1,200 and 1,500. The battle. On the morning of the 20th, the 2 Boer forces met up and awaited the arrival of the British column. After receiving reports of the column's sighting, the Boers positioned themselves in a valley south of the road, forming a skirmish line. Although partially concealed by a shallow ridge, they had limited cover from sparse thorn bushes. Around midday, an advanced British scout spotted what he believed to be a group of Boers heading towards a farmhouse off the road. However, Anstruther, the British commander, dismissed the concern, suggesting it was likely just cattle. As the column approached Bronkhorstspruit River, approximately 150 Boers on their left flank caused the band to halt abruptly. Anstruther ordered his column to halt and prepare for a potential engagement. At that moment, a Boer rider named Paul de Beer approached with a flag of truce to communicate with Anstruther. De Beer, who spoke English, presented Anstruther with a letter from the Boer leaders in Heidelberg. The letter instructed Anstruther to cease any further movement towards Pretoria, warning that it would be seen as a declaration of war. De Beer gave Anstruther a 5-minute time limit to respond to the message. However, Anstruther responded by stating that his orders were to proceed to Pretoria and that he intended to follow those orders. Although he expressed his desire to avoid any confrontation, De Beer persistently questioned Anstruther regarding his stance on war or peace. Anstruther remained firm on his decision to continue on his journey. During this time, approximately 200 to 300 Boers had advanced to a distance of 160 to 220 yards or 150 to 200 meters from the British column. De Beer went back to his commando in search of Joubert and was unable to locate him. However, another Boer leader, Smit, ordered the attack without waiting for Joubert's approval. The Boers swiftly charged towards the road and dismounted, taking cover behind any available obstacles. They opened fire on the British, who were caught in close formation and had failed to seek cover behind the wagons. The Boers specifically targeted the officers and NCOs, causing significant damage. The British were unable to effectively retaliate as many were unarmed or lacked sufficient ammunition. British return shots were largely ineffective as they consistently missed their intended targets, soaring high above the Boers. This issue was attributed to the British soldiers incorrectly setting their sights on the wrong distance. This miscalculation had severe consequences as, within a short span of 15 minutes, all British officers, including Anstruther, were either killed or gravely wounded. Anstruther, who had sustained 5 wounds to his legs, realized the hopelessness of their situation and made the difficult decision to surrender in order to prevent further loss of life. Both Laband and Duxbury estimate that the British suffered a total of 157 casualties in the Battle of Bronkhorstspruit. Laband's breakdown includes 5 officers and 63 men killed, along with 4 officers and 85 men wounded. On the other hand, Duxbury suggests that there were 77 men killed and an additional 80 wounded among the British forces. In contrast, the Boers experienced minimal casualties with approximately 1 or 2 killed and 4 or 5 wounded. Unfortunately, there is no recorded information about the casualties among the native African wagoneers, although it is speculated that some of them were likely killed or injured based on a Boer report stating that they fled the scene. Aftermath. The Boers seized various items from the British, including weapons, ammunition, clothing, wagons and horses. However, they showed some consideration by leaving behind tents, blankets and rations for the British to establish a camp for the wounded soldiers. About 20 British soldiers who were uninjured were permitted to stay behind and care for the wounded, while 2 were authorized to travel to Pretoria to seek medical assistance. Remarkably, Conductor Egerton managed to secretly transport the British colours from the battlefield by concealing them under a stretcher occupied by a wounded Mrs. Fox. He wrapped the colours around his body and successfully brought them to Pretoria. The remaining uninjured soldiers were taken as prisoners to Heidelberg. During the battle, 3 British women, namely Mrs. Fox, Mrs. Meister and Mrs. Smith, were recognized for their efforts and were awarded the Royal Red Cross for their dedication in tending to the wounded. Unfortunately, Anstruther succumbed to his injuries and passed away on the 26th of December after having one of his legs amputated. In January, those who hadn't fully recovered were transported to Pretoria for further medical treatment, while approximately 30 of those who had recuperated were taken as additional prisoners by the Boers. Most of the prisoners were eventually released on parole, but they had to leave the South African Republic as a condition of their release. The Battle of Bronkhorstspruit took place during the First Boer War and marked the first military action of the conflict. It resulted in a morale-boosting victory for the Boers and a humbling experience for the British. Prior to the battle, the British had underestimated the military effectiveness of the Boers. In an attempt to downplay the scale of their loss, British officers criticised the Boers for advancing under a white flag and blamed their own officer Anstruther for negligence. However, Major General Sir George Pomeroy Colley, the British Army's Commander-in-Chief in Transvaal and Natal, acknowledged in a communication to the British government that the Boers' victory would significantly change the situation, as it encouraged them and made them feel more committed to the conflict. During January and February 1881, the Boers besieged multiple towns and fought 3 significant battles. These battles took place at Laings Nek, Skynshoogte or Ingogo, and Majuba Hill. Impressively, the Boers emerged victorious in each battle. Sadly, in the final engagement, the British Colonel Colley lost his life. Subsequently, the British government, acknowledging the Boers' strength, signed the Pretoria Convention. This agreement granted a Transvaal self-government under British suzerainty, effectively restoring the South African Republic. However, tensions between the British and the Boers persisted, culminating in the eruption of the Second Boer War in 1899. If you've made it this far, I hope you're really enjoying this channel. And if you'd like to support the creation of more content like this, because all contributions are greatly appreciated, consider joining the channel in the membership tab or check out the Patreon link in the description below.